her! Hands up, now!
Officer, she's having a medical episode. She has Parkinson's. I helped her cross.
I don't care. Get on your knees. You're reaching into her bag.
That's her phone. She can't speak. Check her medical bracelet.
Turn around. Stop resisting.
I'm not resisting. You're making a mistake. This is all on camera.
Elias Thorne was 48 years old, a man whose reputation was built on steel beams and load-bearing calculations. As a principal structural engineer for a leading infrastructure firm in Seattle, Washington, he spent his days analyzing the stress points of high-rise towers to ensure they could withstand earthquakes. He was a man of immense discipline and cashmere scarves. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with a clean-shaven head and a neatly trimmed beard that was just beginning to gray. He volunteered on weekends teaching chess to inner-city youth and collected vintage fountain pens. In nearly 5 decades of life, he had never even received a speeding ticket. He operated with the belief that dignity was a shield that could deflect the chaos of the world. It was a Thursday in mid-November. The Seattle sky was a bruised purple, dumping a freezing rain that turned the streets into slick ribbons of oil and water. Elias had just left a site inspection in the financial district and was walking toward 3rd Avenue to catch a cab home to Queen Anne. He was thinking about the book he was reading and the hot tea he would brew once he got inside. That was when the flow of the city stopped. Martha Sterling, 79 years old, stood paralyzed in the middle of the intersection at University Street. The walk signal had cycled through its countdown, and the traffic light had turned a hard, unforgiving green. Engines roared to life. Wipers slapped rhythmically against glass. Martha was a small woman disappearing inside a heavy gray wool coat that swallowed her frame. She looked like a leaf trembling in a gale. To the commuters impatient to get home, she was just a barrier. Horns began to sound sharp, angry bursts that bounced off the wet pavement. Elias stopped on the corner. He knew exactly what was happening. His favorite aunt had lived with Parkinson's disease for 15 years. He recognized the look of absolute panic in Martha's eyes, the masking that made her look detached when she was actually terrified. He saw her feet shuffling in place, glued to the asphalt. It was a freezing episode. Her brain was firing the command to walk, but the signal was getting lost in the static of her nervous system. The aggression of the horns was only making her muscles lock tighter. A taxi swerved around her with inches to spare the driver laying on the horn. The spray of cold water soaked Martha's stockings, and she swayed, nearly tipping over. Elias dropped his waterproof briefcase onto the soaking wet sidewalk. He did not look for a crosswalk. He simply marched into the street, raising his arms wide, his presence commanding the space. "Hold it, everyone, stop!" His voice was deep and authoritative, carrying over the noise of the traffic. He reached Martha in seconds. She was vibrating with tremors, her hands gripping her walker so hard her knuckles were translucent. She was staring at her feet, silent tears tracking through the rain on her face. "Ma'am, look at me," Elias said, his voice instantly shifting from a shout to a calm, steady baritone. He placed his large body between her and the headlights, creating a wall of safety. "My name is Elias. I know you are stuck. We are going to work through this." Martha looked up. Her eyes were wide, filled with a desperate plea. Her mouth moved, but the cold and the shock had paralyzed her vocal cords. She let out a small, sharp gasp. "Breathe," Elias coached her. "I am not going to grab you. We are going to rock. Do you know the rock?" She blinked a microscopic nod. "I am going to put my hand on your shoulder. We are going to shift our weight. Left side, then right side. We need to find the beat." Elias placed a gentle gloved hand on her shoulder. "Rock with me. Left, right, left, right." He ignored the delivery van honking behind him. He ignored the freezing rain ruining his Italian leather shoes. He focused entirely on the frightened woman. "Now imagine a line on the ground, a bright red line. On 3, we step over the line. 1, 2, 3, step." It was a classic cueing strategy. The brain needed a specific target to break the feedback loop of the freeze. Martha's right foot lifted and planted forward. "Perfect," Elias smiled warmly. "Again. Step over the line. Step." Slowly, metronomically, they began to move. To a cynic, it looked like a struggle. To anyone with a heart, it was a ballet of compassion. Step by step, Elias guided her out of the danger zone. When they finally reached the curb, Elias guided her to the dry bench under a building overhang. He knelt on one knee on the wet concrete eye level with her. "You are safe now, Martha. I see your bracelet." He read the metal tag on her wrist. "Martha Sterling, Parkinson's, speech impairment. I am going to call your family, all right?" Martha was shaking violently now, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. She nodded her hands, fumbling in her purse for her smartphone. "Let me help you with that," Elias said softly, reaching for the device. That was when the siren chirped short and aggressive. A police cruiser pulled up, mounting the curb with 2 wheels. Officer Ryan Graves stepped out. He was 28, ambitious and conditioned to see threats where there were none. He saw a large black man looming over a shaking elderly white woman. He saw the man reaching into her purse. He did not see assistance. He saw a predator. "Back away, get your hands up!" Graves shouted, his hand resting on the grip of his pistol. Elias froze. He knew the script. He moved with deliberate slowness, placing the phone on the bench and rising to his full height, palms open and facing the officer. "Officer, she is having a medical episode," Elias said, his voice steady and calm. "She has Parkinson's. I just helped her cross the street." "I said back away from the victim," Graves shouted, adrenaline flushing his face. "Turn around. Get on your knees now." "Officer, please observe her," Elias said, refusing to kneel but keeping his hands visible. "She cannot speak clearly. Check her medical ID. You are refusing a lawful order." Graves did not wait to assess. He rushed forward, grabbing Elias's arm and twisting it behind his back. He swept Elias's legs out from under him. Elias hit the wet pavement hard, his glasses skittering across the sidewalk. "You are hurting me for no reason," Elias stated loudly, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "I am a structural engineer. My ID is in my jacket." "Quiet, stop resisting." Graves ratcheted the handcuffs tight, the metal biting into Elias's wrists. "You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and attempted robbery." Martha let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She tried to stand her walker slipping. She reached toward the officer, her hand shaking uncontrollably. She shook her head furiously. "No good man." The words were slurred, barely intelligible chunks of sound. "Ma'am, I have him. You are safe," Graves yelled, assuming she was hysterical from the attack. Martha pointed at Elias, then clapped her hands together, then pointed at the street and mimed walking. She struck her own chest and pointed to Elias again. "She is trying to tell you I saved her," Elias said, his face pressed against the cold sidewalk. "Shut your mouth." Graves shoved Elias down. "You have the right to remain silent." Pedestrians had stopped. A crowd was forming. Phones were out. "Are you crazy?" a woman in a business suit shouted. "I watched him help her. He stopped traffic for her." "Back up, folks. Give me space," Graves commanded, looking unnerved by the audience. Elias was shoved into the back of the patrol car. He watched as EMTs arrived to check on Martha. She was pushing their hands away, pointing at the police car, her face twisted in anguish and fury. Elias spent 16 hours in the holding cell. They took his tie. They took his belt. They took his dignity. He sat on a metal bench, cold and humiliated, worrying about his wife and his project deadlines. He was released at 8:00 a.m. No charges were filed yet, but the arrest was in the system. His suit was ruined. His glasses were scratched. But the real damage was to his faith in the system he had always respected. But Officer Graves had made a fatal error. He assumed Martha's inability to speak meant she had no voice. Martha's son, Daniel Sterling, was a federal prosecutor. When he picked his mother up from the hospital, she was weak, but her eyes were burning with a fierce intelligence. She could not speak fluently, but she had a pen and a notepad. She wrote in shaky, capitalized letters, "He saved me. Police hurt him. Find him." Daniel felt a dangerous calm wash over him. "I will find him, Mom." Daniel did not just find Elias. He went to war. They pulled the traffic cam footage. It showed the cars nearly hitting Martha. It showed Elias dropping everything to shield her. It showed the slow, patient way he helped her walk. They pulled the bystander videos. They showed Graves escalating the situation instantly. They showed the crowd screaming that Elias was a hero. And the body cam footage was the final blow. It showed Elias compliant, calm, and informative. It showed Martha trying to intervene. It showed Graves acting on pure bias. 5 months later, the deposition took place. Martha had been working with a speech therapist daily. She was determined. She sat at the head of the table. Officer Graves sat opposite, looking small and pale. "Mrs. Sterling," Elias's lawyer asked, "tell us about November 14th. Martha took a deep breath. She stared directly at Graves. "I froze," she said. The words were slow but distinct. "The noise, the cars." She pointed a trembling finger at the photo of Elias. "Elias, he was my rock, he was gentle." And the officer, Martha's eyes narrowed. "He was blind," she said, her voice rising. "I tried to tell him. He did not care. He saw a criminal. He missed the hero." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "He broke a good man because he was too proud to listen." The room was deadly silent. Graves stared at the table, unable to meet her eyes. The consequences were severe. The footage was released. The headline screamed, "The engineer and the officer, a failure of justice." The police chief was forced to publicly apologize to Elias. The department implemented the Sterling Protocol, a mandatory training program for recognizing medical distress versus criminal behavior. Officer Graves was terminated. He lost his badge. He moved out of state, his career in law enforcement over. But the real ending happened the following Thanksgiving. Elias's house was warm, filled with the smell of roasting turkey and spices. The doorbell rang. Elias answered it. Daniel stood there holding a bottle of aged bourbon, and holding his arm was Martha. She looked elegant in a new coat. She held a basket of homemade muffins. "Happy Thanksgiving, Elias," she said, smiling. Elias did not shake her hand. He hugged her gently. "Happy Thanksgiving, Martha." They sat at the table, the black engineer and the elderly white grandmother holding hands while Elias said grace. They were bound together by a moment of terror and a fight for what was right. Elias still builds buildings, but he also runs a non-profit that helps victims of police misconduct. He tells the young men he mentors, "You cannot control the world's blindness, but you can control your own vision. Walk with your head high and never let them change who you are." The lesson. We live in a world that prioritizes speed over understanding. Officer Graves's mistake was not just aggression, it was arrogance. He believed his first impression was the absolute truth. He looked at a scene and let his stereotypes write the story, deciding who was the villain before asking a single question. But truth often whispers. You have to be quiet to hear it. We must learn to pause. We must learn to look deeper. True authority is not about force, it is about wisdom. When we let our biases drive our actions, we do not just hurt an individual. We fracture the trust of the entire community. Be the person who steps into the rain to help, not the one who rushes in to judge.